My phone buzzed the second I finished tightening the last screw on a doorbell cam. New install, rich couple, whole house wired to an app. I drove off, hit the highway, and got a text from an unknown number. You missed a spot by the hinge. No name, no photo, just that. I laughed once, then checked my work notes. I hadn't told anyone the hinge side was loose. I hadn't even written it down. I pulled over anyway, heart doing that dumb stutter it does when you know you're about to look crazy. I called the number. It rang once, then dropped. I called again. Dead. I sat there on the shoulder with semis roaring past, staring at my own reflection in the black screen like I was waiting for it to blink. I told myself it was the client. Rich people get weird about security. They think every ding is a threat and every tech is a suspect. I kept driving, but the text followed me like a hand on my neck. I didn't even want to touch the hinge side again, because then it would feel like I was taking instructions from some stranger. Back at the shop, I opened our installer dashboard. It's just tiles and green dots. It's supposed to make you feel in control. I checked the job entry. No notes, no gold bucks, no hinge, anything. The only thing that stood out was a tiny view count on the doorbell feed, like someone had already been peeking at it after I left. Next day, it started again. Notifications I never turned on. Screenshots of my own location dot. A message that described what I was eating in my car. Another that described the shirt I pulled from my hamper. It wasn't even poetic. It was petty and specific. Don't spill that coffee on the seat. You left the passenger window cracked. Blue shirt, right side hole. I look up from my steering, like I expected to see somebody crouched in the back. I changed passwords. I wiped my phone. I told my boss. He acted bored and told me to stop being dramatic, like paranoia was a personality flaw. I told him to quit treating me like a fucking idiot and look at what I was showing him. I watched his eyes do that little flick to my phone, like he didn't want it on his desk. He told me the numbers were probably spoofed, that I was feeding it by reacting. I asked him who at the company could see my location dot. He said nobody, then corrected himself and said, only admins, like that was supposed to calm me down. I went the professional route and wrote up a ticket to IT. Our IT guy treated me like I'd asked him to fix my feelings. He said internal accounts exist for QA, vendor support, tooling, whatever. I asked why any internal account would know what I ate in my van. He shrugged and said maybe I posted it. I don't post my food. I barely post anything. My hand started shaking, and I hated him for making me sound like I was inventing this for attention. So I tried to prove it instead of explain it. I started leaving fake breadcrumbs. I put a wrench on the dash and texted my coworker a photo of it, just to create detail. 10 minutes later, nice wrench. I wrote call back in big letters on my notepad and left it on the passenger seat. Text, stop writing in all caps. I turned my phone's location off for a whole hour. Text, turn it back on. I like the map. That one made my mouth go dry. That wasn't a prank. That was someone getting annoyed they couldn't see. I tried locking my own access down, like I could out-admin whoever this was. I changed my installer password again, then forced a logout on all sessions. The portal popped a little banner that said success, like a pat on the head. 20 minutes later, my email pinged. Password changed. I hadn't touched it. I reset it again, then watched the log. Same internal tool account, same neat little entry, slipping in right after me like it was shadowing my clicks. I walked out to my van and tore it apart, checking under the dash and behind the fuse box because my brain needed something physical to fight. I found nothing, which somehow felt worse. I drove back to the rich couple's house because I needed to look at something with my own eyes. I wasn't scheduled. I just showed up. I rang the bell and watched the little LED blink. The husband opened the door like he'd been expecting a delivery. Not me. I told him the hinge side needed a quick tweak. He stared at my tool bag like it could bite him. His wife hovered behind him with her phone up, already recording because of course she was. I asked straight if they texted me. They both swore they hadn't, and it wasn't the kind of denial that felt guilty, it was the kind that felt offended like I'd accused them of stepping in dog shit. The husband told me not to come back without an appointment, and the wife muttered something about calling my company. I walked away with my face burning, not because they scared me, but because they looked at me like I was the intruder in my own life. That's when I stopped pretending it was the clients. That text didn't come from inside their house. It came from inside my work. I started checking my own apartment like I was robbing it. I unplugged my smart speaker. I reset my router. I covered my indoor cam and left it powered just to see if someone complained. They did. "Why'd you blind it?" I didn't answer. I didn't type. I just sat on my couch with the TV off, listening to my fridge cycle, waiting for the next poke. That night, my living room TV turned itself on. Volume at 0. Input on a blank camera feed. My front door shot from the street. My building. My steps. I yanked the power cord and sat in the dark, sweating because I installed this shit for a living and I couldn't tell where the back door was. I kept thinking about how many devices in my place I'd hooked up out of convenience. Doorbell, indoor cam, smart TV, a cheap little hub I got from the company store because it was employee discount. I'd basically built a glass box around myself and handed the keys to whatever asshole had admin privileges. The next morning, I checked the admin logs on the company dashboard and found an account I'd never made, labeled like an internal tool. It had been viewing my devices for weeks. The timestamps made my stomach flip. Late night, early morning, during showers, during those dead hours when you think you're alone and you're not performing for anybody. The account name looked harmless, like a feature, like something you'd ignore in a list. But it kept popping up on my personal devices, not customer installs. It was the same pattern over and over: my doorbell feed, my indoor cam, my TV, my location requests. Like someone was pacing around the edges of my day, checking if I was still there. I screenshotted everything and walked into my boss's office again. He didn't take the phone. He didn't lean in. He just got angry, fast, like I'd accused him personally. He told me I was misreading logs, that those tools are normal, that vendors need access to troubleshoot. I asked him why vendor troubleshooting needed to watch my front door at midnight. He told me, flat, that if I kept making noise, I'd lose my job. Something snapped in me then, not brave, just desperate. I told him if he wasn't going to lock it down, I'd go above him. He stared at me like I just threatened his kid. He told me to get out of his office and calm down before you do something stupid. I tried to go above him. HR sent me a calendar link for next week. Next week. Like this was a benefits question. I called the vendor support line myself and got a script reader who asked me for device serial numbers and told me to reboot. I said someone is watching me through an internal tool account. He put me on hold and came back with the same sentence, like it was printed on his tongue. They don't have access to customer video feeds. I told him I wasn't a customer, I was an installer, and I was looking at the fucking logs. He repeated the sentence again, slower, like I was the one who didn't understand words. I stopped sleeping. I'd doze, then wake up and check every screen in the apartment like a junkie checking for a fix. I started thinking about what else that account could do. If it could see my cams, it could see where I'd been. If it could see where I'd been, it could predict where I'd go. I kept picturing a guy from the shop, someone I'd shared donuts with, sitting in his car across the street with a laptop, watching my front door and laughing at me, trying to act normal. On the fourth day, I walked into a job and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I dropped a screw. It bounced under a cabinet and I just stood there staring at the gap because my brain went blank. The client asked if I was okay and I lied and said I hadn't slept. The client laughed like that was relatable. I finished the install on muscle memory and barely remembered driving home. I quit that day. I tossed my phone in a drawer and bought a burner. I still get the same kind of message sometimes, short, casual, like a friend checking in. Always from a new number. Always knowing where I am. Grades went in, and my inbox filled up like a sewer backing up. A student I failed started showing up everywhere. Outside my lab, in the coffee line, at the bus stop. I kept changing routes. He kept being there anyway. I failed him because he didn't do the work. Not did it badly. He skipped labs, turned in blanks, ignored the warnings, then acted like I'd robbed him when the grade posted. A week after finals, I stepped out of my room to lock up, and he was leaned against the opposite wall like he'd been installed there. He didn't say anything. He just watched my hands on the key, watched my badge, watched the way I tucked the marker in my pocket. I cut left, and he let his eyes follow like a leash. I told myself it was a coincidence. Campus is full of bodies. My brain loves patterns when it's stressed. I still took a different stairwell. After that, he started appearing like a glitch. I'd go earlier, he'd be there earlier. I'd go later, he'd be there later. I'd duck through the loading dock to avoid the main quad, and he'd be across the street at the far end of the sidewalk with his phone in his hand, and the screen dark, like the phone was just a prop so he could stand there without a reason. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't rush me. He didn't threaten me. He just kept being in my line of sight long enough to let my body do the rest. Then the emails started. Not to me, to my department chair. Screenshots of me flirting with students. A fake message thread with my name at the top and the worst shit typed underneath. Someone copied my signature line perfectly, down to the weird punctuation. My chair forwarded the first one with a short, "Please come by." When I saw it on her screen, I felt my stomach drop like I'd missed a step. It looked like me because someone had studied me. The spacing, the sign off, the little dash, I always use the dumb way I format my phone number. I asked for headers. I asked for timestamps. I asked for anything that wasn't a screenshot. She did that tight smile people do when they're already thinking about what this does to them. She asked if I'd had any issues with students before. I said no. She asked if anyone might misinterpret me. I asked her what the fuck that even meant. She told me to calm down and document everything. I emailed IT the same day and asked for login history and verification logs. They replied like I'd asked them to fix weather. No evidence of compromise. Screenshots aren't proof. Contact campus police. I changed my passwords anyway. I turned on every verification option. I locked down my socials. 2 days later, I got a password reset alert I didn't trigger, and I almost threw up right there in my office. HR called me in. They sat me down and slid printouts across a table like they were doing me a favor. I asked to see headers, timestamps, anything real. They gave me that tight smile people use when they've already decided. The HR guy kept his hands folded, face blank, like he'd trained for this. Treat the accused like an inconvenience, not a person. They asked if I'd ever messaged students outside official channels. I said I used the LMS and my university email. That's it. They asked if I'd ever met a student alone off campus. I said no. They asked if I had any history of boundary issues. I laughed once sharp because I couldn't stop it. The HR guy told me to watch my language. I told him to watch his priorities. I brought up the student I failed. I said he'd been showing up around me since grades went in. I said this started right after I posted the final grade. I showed them my folder, dates, places, screenshots, the weird coincidences that weren't coincidences anymore. The HR guy glanced at it like it was a grocery list and asked if I had proof the student created the messages. I said no, because I'm not a forensic lab, and that's why I needed the university to actually investigate instead of printing out screenshots like Holy Scripture. He wrote something down without looking up. My friends got messages too. Concerned notes about my behavior. Rumors moved faster than facts. People stopped answering texts. Colleagues stopped meeting my eyes. A grad student I mentored suddenly didn't need guidance anymore. A collaborator paused our project until things settled. I watched my own life shrink because one person kept pushing and everyone else kept stepping back like I was contagious. I filed a report. The campus cop said there wasn't much to do until there was a direct threat. He asked the same question HR asked, like they all read from the same stupid script. Did he threaten you directly? I said no, but he's stalking me and someone is impersonating me. The cop shrugged and told me to avoid being alone. He suggested I change my passwords like I hadn't already done it 3 times. I asked what I was supposed to do, wait for an explicit threat like it was a coupon. He told me to calm down. I walked out shaking, furious, and embarrassed at the same time, like I just begged for help and been told I didn't qualify. So I started living like I was already in court. I stopped joking in emails. I wrote everything like it would be read aloud to a panel. I stopped taking the same route twice. I recorded voice memos when I walked to my car. I kept my office door locked, even when I was inside. I stacked evidence in a folder like it could protect me. One afternoon, I came out of an HR meeting and saw him across the quad. He didn't wave. He didn't smirk. He just stood there, hand in pockets, no phone, no book, no reason, and watched me like he'd placed a bet and knew it would pay out. I wanted to walk straight at him and blow up, make it public, make it ugly. I didn't. I kept moving because I could already see how that would get used against me. When I got back to my office, someone had slid a blank sheet of paper under my door. Nothing written, just a paper, like a reminder that he could reach me without touching me. Near the end of the term, my chair stopped meeting my eyes. She'd used to act like my ally. Now she spoke to me like a risk. She started CCing GHR on routine emails like she needed witnesses to my existence. When I asked if there was any progress, she said HR was handling it. When I asked if I should keep teaching, she said, just be careful, like careful is something you can be when someone else is writing your reputation. The day I got told my contract wouldn't be renewed, I walked out carrying a box and saw him across the quad. He didn't wave. He just stood there and watched me leave like he'd evicted me from my own name. I got in my car, threw the box in the back seat, and sat with my keys in my fist until my knuckles hurt. I kept thinking if I drive away, he wins. Then I thought if I stay, he keeps winning anyway. I moved cities. New job, new apartment, new routine. 2 months in, my new supervisor forwarded an anonymous note in that same careful tone, just making you aware of prior concerns. No proof, just poison. She said she had to take it seriously. I told her it was retaliation, that someone had impersonated me back at my old campus. She nodded, but her eyes did that flicker, doubt settling in like dust. I started seeing the small signs again. Someone watching too long at the train platform. A coworker going quiet mid-sentence when I walked into the break room. An unfamiliar car idling near my building. I opened my old evidence folder and kept adding to it, like I was building a file for a judge who would never show up. 2 months in, a new student sat in the front row of a workshop I was assisting and stared at me like we were continuing something. Different face. Same look. Same fucking patience. I re-keyed a woman's locks after her ex lost his keys. Routine job. I swapped the cylinders, handed her new keys, and left with the old hardware in my bucket like scrap. She stayed right behind me with her shoulders up, phone in her fist, eyes bouncing between my hands and the peephole like she expected it to blink. When the deadbolt clicked, she flinched. I drove longer screws into the strike plate, sank them into the stud, and told her to test the door twice every night. She nodded too hard, like agreement was armor, and asked if the old parts meant anything. I said no, it's just metal. And even as I said it, I knew it sounded like bullshit. 2 nights later, my work van alarm chirped once. Not a full blast, just a warning. I got up pissed, then saw the tracker notification and my guts went cold. I went outside barefoot and found the side door cracked, just enough to look accidental. No broken glass, no bent metal. The inside smelled like sweat that didn't belong to me, stale and sour, like someone leaned in and waited. I checked the shelves by touch, because a clean hit messes with your head more than a smash and grab. Drill, saw, fittings, radio, the stupid cash in the console, all still there. Then I grabbed my zipper pouch, and it felt wrong. Too light. My pick set was gone. Only that. Not the tools, not the power packs, not the copper fittings I hoard. Just the picks and tension bars. That felt personal. Like someone didn't want money, they wanted access. I checked the door edge again and saw tiny shiny scuffs where something thin had worked the latch. Whoever did it knew how to be quiet. Whoever did it also knew exactly where that pouch sits. I called it in anyway. The dispatcher sounded bored, like I'd called to complain about a pothole. A patrol guy showed up, shined his light around, and asked why I even had picks. I showed my license and paperwork. He asked if anything valuable was missing. I said yes. He wrote, miscellaneous tools, and told me to lock the van better. I told him it was locked. He gave me that half smile people use when they decide you're the problem and said, sure. I wanted to tell him to go fuck himself, but I swallowed it because I've learned how fast a badge turns you into the suspect. He didn't dust for prints. He didn't ask neighbors. He left me a case number and drove off like I was an inconvenience. Next morning, I called my dispatcher and told her I wasn't taking jobs in that building until someone took this seriously. She said I don't get to pick and choose. I said someone stole only the tools that open doors, and it happened 2 days after I changed a woman's locks because her ex lost his keys. She said I was spiraling, told me I watched too much true crime, told me I was turning a petty theft into a conspiracy. I argued until my throat went raw. She kept steering it back to numbers, like fear was a scheduling problem. Later that day, a service call came in from the same building. Different unit. Same handwriting on the form. Not the manager's scribble. Her careful rounded letters, like she wrote with her wrist stiff so it wouldn't shake. I stared at it, swore under my breath, and drove there anyway. When the elevator opened on her floor, she was in the hallway, not inside her unit, pale and shaking, holding her phone like a weapon. She shoved the screen at me. A photo of her bathroom mirror, fogged, and someone had written "Still Mine" in the steam with a finger. Big letters, sloppy, confident. She said she showered alone. She said she wiped it and it came back the next night. Same words, same height on the glass, like someone knew exactly where her face would be. She said the cops came and asked if maybe it was just condensation and left like they'd handled it. I went to her door and crouched. Fresh scratches on the strike plate, thin, bright lines where metal met metal. Not keys, not settling. Someone had worked the latch and kept working it. Someone had been in there with the right tools. My tools. I checked the cylinder I'd installed. No drill marks, no pry scars, deadbolts still smooth. That meant he wasn't breaking in like a desperate thief. He was testing it like a challenge. He wanted her to know the new lock wasn't a wall. It was a scoreboard. She asked if I gave him a key. The accusation hit me hot, and I snapped back before I could soften it. I told her I don't hand keys to men I don't see. I don't make copies for just in case. I don't play sides. She snapped that he isn't a stranger. He's her mistake, and he doesn't take no. A neighbor's door cracked open down the hall, and she shut her mouth fast, eyes wide, like even being heard was dangerous. That did something ugly to me. I tightened the strike plate, checked the hinges, checked the frame, and showed her how to keep the latch engaged, how to watch the gap, how to listen for the soft clicks that mean a lock is being worked. I told her to get a camera. She said the building won't allow it. I told her to put one inside, aimed at the door anyway. She said she'd asked friends to stay, and nobody wanted drama. She said the building manager keeps saying they need damage to do anything. She said the police keep asking if he hit her yet. She said no, and the word, yet, sat there between us like a bruise. I went downstairs and found the building manager. I told him someone was trying to break into a tenant's unit, and they were using locksmith tools stolen from my van. He smiled like I was upselling security. He said they have cameras. I told him to pull the footage. He said they only review footage if there's damage. I told him the scratches are damage. He said that's where. I asked him, loud, how many scratches equal a break-in? He told me to calm down and stop upsetting residents. I almost laughed in his face. I kept my hands open so I wouldn't do something I couldn't undo. Then I walked out before I told him to go fuck himself. That night, I dumped my scrap bucket on my garage floor and counted the old cylinders because if someone had time in my van, they had time with everything. One cylinder from her job was missing. I stood there holding empty air where it should have been, and my throat tightened. I told myself I dropped it, that I mixed it with another job, that I was tired. I swept the rest back into the bucket, locked the van, checked the lock twice, then checked it again because my hand wouldn't believe my eyes. I got home, opened my door, and froze. That missing lock cylinder sat on my kitchen counter. I hadn't brought it in. I hadn't even brought the bucket in. The keyway faced up like an eye. Clean brass, placed neat like someone staged it. I searched my apartment with a kitchen knife because panic hands use stupid tools. Closet, shower, behind the bed, under the sink, every place a body could fold. Nothing. No broken window. No forced latch. No missing items. Just that cylinder in my house like a message. I called the cops and they asked if anything was actually stolen. I wanted to punch the wall. I wanted to scream. I told them someone entered my home and left evidence. They asked if I had cameras. I said no. They told me to change my locks and file it online. I asked what happens when he hurt someone and they got quiet, then told me they can't act on feelings. I filed the report online like they told me, sitting at my kitchen table with that cylinder in front of me. The website asked for dollar amounts, serial numbers, a list of stolen property. I typed none, and it felt like lying. An auto email hit my inbox 5 minutes later thanking me for my submission. That was it. No call, no patrol, just a receipt for being scared. I stood there staring at that cylinder, realizing the point wasn't theft. The point was rejection. He wanted her to know the door didn't mean shit. He wanted me to know it too, because I was the guy she paid to make the door mean something. I changed my locks at sunrise. I changed my route. I moved my van where I could see it and started checking it twice before getting in. I bought a new pick set and kept it on my body like a wallet because I couldn't stand the idea of it being used against someone again. I started watching cars behind me. I started checking my rear view for the same headlights. I tried to reach the woman and got nothing back. Voicemail, unread texts. The silence felt like a slammed door inside my head. Last week, at a red light, I saw a man in the car behind me holding a lockpick between 2 fingers, tapping it on the steering like a metronome. He didn't honk. He didn't pass. He just kept time.